Forgot to test my microphone before starting the live, so hopefully that's working. Welcome to Pelado Creations. This is Miter Saw Use and Safety Edition. This has been specifically requested by my wife's brother's wife, and who recently acquired a miter saw. And so see what we can do about figuring out how to safely use a miter saw. And of course, everyone else is open to participate as well. Not just my my wife's brother's wife that can watch. So anyone, if you have questions about the miter saw, how to use it, any safety features or safety precautions, feel free to throw them in the chat. No question is too dumb, probably. And we'll see what we can figure out. Again, let me know if you have any questions. So without further ado, let's get into it. So this is a miter saw, right? And you might ask yourself, what is a miter saw good for, right? So a miter saw is intended for crosscuts, right? So let me get out a piece of wood here. All right, so this is a piece of wood. Looks like redwood. And if I want to cut this way against the grain, that's a crosscut. If I want to cut it along the grain, with the grain, that is a rip cut. The miter saw is not intended for rip cuts. It's intended for cross cuts, okay? So if you want to rip something, the appropriate tool for that is generally going to be a table saw, okay? You guys see the table saw in the picture? Right there. If you're doing cross cuts, then the miter saw is often the appropriate tool, but not always, okay? So with that in mind, we'll put the sample piece of wood on the ground. I'll just set it there for now. And we can talk a little bit more about the aspects of the miter saw. Oh, looks like we've got somebody in chat here. Hey, Mike, how's it going? About to start your own live? Hey, appreciate it. Yeah, I think when I'm finished here, I'll probably be joining you, Mike. All right, before you start using the miter saw, there are a few things that you should be wearing or not wearing, okay? So one thing you should not be wearing, jewelry, right? Rings, necklaces, anything like that. Don't wear it, okay? Gloves, also a really bad thing to be wearing, because if you wear gloves, the blade can catch the fabric and pull your hand into the blade. Not good, right? If you are not wearing gloves and the blade hits you, you can just pull your hand away and you know, you're going to get cut, but you know, your damage is limited. With a gloved hand, when that fabric gets caught, it pulls you in and you got a mangled hand at the end. So not so great, okay? Also, you should tie back your hair. Never really had that problem. So, you know, for those of you who do have long hair, you know, tie it in the back, whatever, put it up, make sure it's not in the way where it's going to get, you know, pulled into the blade. Okay, look at my outline here a little bit. All right, so let's talk a bit about the miter saw itself. Oh, wait. More on, so I told you what not to wear, but with a few things that you should wear, okay? I don't know if you can see right here on my handle, I've got some safety glasses so that I never forget to put on eyewear before I start using the miter saw. I've also got some ear protection here. Okay, so put those on. The miter saw gets to be very loud and it can hurt your ears. And for me, I typically like to connect it to dust collection. Okay, so I've got my little shop vac set up here that I can just plug this right into the dust collection port and back. But when I run my shop vac, that sometimes is even more loud than the miter saw. And when you've got both of them running, it's pretty loud. Okay. The dust collection on miter saws doesn't usually work that great. It's better than no dust collection, but still not that great. And so every time you use the miter saw, you're going to be creating sawdust. All right. And breathing in sawdust, not that great for your lungs. So I typically don't wear any breathing protection while I'm using the miter saw because I've got the dust collection going into the vacuum. I probably should though. So, you know, you can use, if you're going to put it on, probably put it on before you put your ear protection on so that you can get your mask around there and then put on your hearing protection. Okay. All right, so take that off for a moment as we continue talking about the miter saw itself. All right, so let's talk about the components of the miter saw. All right, so number one, we'll talk about the plug, right? And right now I've got it unplugged. And why is that? Because I'm messing around with it, right? So you don't want to, and of course I've got it trapped in here. I'm not sure how I was able to do that, but there we go. Wow, really got it in there. All right. So whenever you're messing around with it, adjusting it, moving it, whatever, have it unplugged so that you are not in danger of injuring yourself, right? So I'll just put that like there instead of running it through where it can get caught again, if that's all right with you guys. All right, the blade. The blade is under here, right? This is a 10-inch blade. You can get miter saws that are smaller that take a 7.5-inch blade, I believe. You can also get miter saws that are bigger that will take a 12-inch blade. If you wanted to put a smaller blade on a 10-inch miter saw, you can, right? Or if you want to put a 10-inch blade on a 12-inch miter saw, you can. But you might be somewhat limited as to what you can cut because when this goes down, it's only going to go down so far over here. And so you might not be able to cut all the way through if you're using a smaller blade than what's indicated. I've never really tried that, so I'm not exactly sure, but that would be my guess. So covering the blade is the blade guard. And you notice if I want to show you the blade, I've got to pull it back and it's spring loaded. So it automatically goes back into place. But when I'm cutting with the saw, it automatically retracts. So I don't need to be messing with the blade guard while I'm actually trying to cut something, okay? Talk about the table, right? So this is the table of the miter saw, okay? You want this to be nice and flat, okay? And in the middle of our table, we've got the throat plate here. And the throat plate can be removed. See, it's got screws that you can undo, pull the throat plate out, clean underneath, put it back. You can also make your own throat plate. And one of the reasons why you might want to do that is because you can make a zero clearance throat plate. The benefit of a zero clearance throat plate is that the only opening is where the blade goes through. And so you have more support for your workpiece and generally have less tear out, right? So if you have a big opening a lot of times you can have kind of messy edges after you make your cut. And so having a zero clearance, it's safer, and it also gives you generally a better cut quality. I'm doing a little shortcut on the zero clearance throat plate by having this basically yellow sticker on there. And you can see right in here, maybe you can, right? You can see right in here, it's narrower than over here, right? Because when I've done cuts with this guy, when I've done sliding cuts, I've come out here on the sliding cuts, but I've probably used the bevel adjustment to turn it to like a 45 and cut at a 45-degree angle. And so that's widened it over here. And so I still have zero clearance here, but not here. So I might need to replace this. I've got some more. I'm not sure exactly where I put them. But that's a kind of a shortcut to getting zero clearance without having to replace the throat plate. The one downside is that it does increase the height there just a little bit, because there's, it's not very thick, but there's a little bit of thickness there. So if you're trying to make very precise cuts, then you don't really want a sticker on top messing things up. But the miter saw isn't really intended for very precise cuts anyway, and so you're probably fine either way. Billy, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. And all right, so that's the throat plate. Fence. So we've got our fence, right? This is the fence of the miter saw. And the fence should be at 90 degrees to the table, okay? And when you're cutting something, you want, let me just pull something down here. When you're cutting something, you want the material to be secure against both the table and against the fence, okay? Because when this blade starts going, you need to have this workpiece in place, because otherwise the blade will catch it and start throwing it places. So both the table and the fence, very important. You don't want to try cutting something like this. That's going to end very badly, okay? So make sure it's secure against the table and against the fence. And you'll notice that the fence here is kind of divided, all right? And the reason for that is I can loosen it, slide this over, or even completely off, okay? Why would I want to move it over or off? Because of some features that are not available on every miter saw. Well, they're available on pretty much every miter saw, but not necessarily on every chop saw, okay? So the first of the, oh, I didn't put that in quite straight. It helps to put it in properly. And it's easiest to do properly if you test it out before you go live. There we go. That's better. All right. So let's say you want to operate the machine, okay? There's a trigger right up here. You guys see the trigger? Here's the trigger, right? But if I try pushing the trigger, it just clicks. It doesn't go all the way in, it just clicks. Because right next to the trigger is a safety, okay? So hey, here we go. So here's the trigger, and here's the safety, right? So I can't push the trigger in all the way unless I've depressed the safety. Then I can do the trigger and do my cut, okay? Now, a few things that are available on this that might not be available on all miter saws. Number one is the bevels, okay? So if you just have a chop saw, then you won't be able to do this part. But one of the nice things about the miter saw is being able to cut miters. So on mine, I just push this button down, and then I can turn to a different angle, right? And you can see there are angles designated here. And right here is 0, right? And where it says 0, that's basically making a 90-degree cut on your workpiece, okay? And then there are unlimited angles that you can go to between 50 here, 0, and then 60 over here. But there are a few spots that are more common than others. So for example, this is at 15 degrees, and then 22.5, 31.6, 45, and then it's blocked over here, but it'll go all the way to 60 and lock in there. Okay, so I'll just bring it back to 0. I can also adjust this one. This is a compound miter, compound miter saw. So it will allow me to do not only adjustments that way, it will also allow me to tilt the blade either way, that direction. Okay, so the way I do that on this one is I have to release this part. So this is the lock. And then I've got a little thing right here that I also have to move. And then that'll allow me to tilt all the way over here to about 45 degrees. And then all the way back to the other side, about 45 degrees, all right? And I'm going to bring it back to about 0 and lock it down. When you do that, though, you should test your blade for square when you put it back to your 0 degrees. So you're going to want some type of reliable square. So this is just a machinist square. And you'll measure not on a carbide tooth, right? And so right there, I've got, that looks actually pretty square. And let me look from the other side too. And that's also pretty good. So I'm going to call that good enough. And it's also good to check your fence for square. And if you're having trouble getting good quality cuts that result in good joints, then checking for square on all of the different components is a good idea. You know, check for square between the table and the fence, between the table and the blade, and between the fence and the blade, all the good stuff, right? Okay, and what else? Oh, the hold down. So this is a hold down, okay? And so if I'm trying to cut something, I can basically clamp it down like that relatively easily. And that way when I'm cutting it, it's not going to move, okay? So you can do some quick adjustments because it just slides here. And then after you put it down, you want to tighten it down a few turns so that it's locked in, and so your piece doesn't move around. That way when you cut, it's not going to move. Now you'll notice, perhaps, that this guy doesn't go very far over, right? So this right here is about a 5-inch zone from the blade. And you see the little symbol that says no hands? If you're cutting something that small, you really shouldn't be having your hands over here. I mean, let's say you're cutting something bigger, you can just use the clamp here, the hold down. and secure it with your hand. But if you're cutting something that this won't reach, you don't want to be putting your hand there. Okay, there are tools that you can use, like a $1 million stick or $10 million stick, I think they call it, that allows you to get pressure there without putting your fingers nearby. You could also use, just a regular stick of some kind. But if you're looking to cut something that's really small, you need to look at how much support you have back here, right? So there's no support between here and here at the bottom, okay? There is some support up here, but if you're cutting something that's not that tall, that's not really going to help you at all, okay? So if you're cutting something that's only about that long, that wide, this is not the tool to do that on, okay? Because you just don't have enough support to protect it from doing anything. The other thing is, if you're, again, wanting to cut something that is wider than it is long, don't, right? You just don't have the kind of support back here that's going to allow you to do it. And it's very likely that the blade's going to catch that workpiece and throw it somewhere. And you don't want that to be at you, okay? All right, let's take a look at our Billy's got the 12-inch Porter cable. Sweet. How's the family doing today? Doing pretty well. Doing pretty well. Okay. All right. When you are getting ready to use the miter saw, you want to consider your workspace. Okay. This is a lot cleaner workspace than what I've typically had on my miter saw, because I knew I was doing this about miter saw safety and everything. You don't want a bunch of stuff all around, right? So you want it nice and clean, nice and clear, so that things aren't going to be interfering with you, things aren't going to be distracting you. And you also want to be able to support your workpiece, okay? So this guy is, relatively small, right? Going to be pretty easy to support with just the hold down there, right? But what if I'm cutting something a lot bigger, right? Well, if I come back over here to the our sample workpiece from earlier, okay? Say I just want to cut off the end of that. I've got support here. I can clamp that down, and you can see I've also got support over here, right? Because I've basically built this up so that it is pretty much the same height as the table, okay? I used to have this positioned differently, and so it wasn't quite as useful. It's a little bit better now. It's still not the greatest, right? Because my support point there is, less than 21 inches from the blade. So anytime I'm cutting something that's wider than 21 inches, I need to have that support. But if I'm cutting something that's 8 feet long, which is not that uncommon, it's pretty common thing for people using miter saws to be cutting something that's 8 feet long. This is not going to give you enough support, right? So you'll really need the clamp. What I've been planning to do is make to basically rebuild my miter saw stand, so that I've got much more support on either side. Because let's say I'm cutting something that's 8 feet long, I've got 4 feet over here and 4 feet over there. I don't want things to be crashing down as I'm cutting them. And let's see. Oh, another big thing is you want your miter saw to be in a secure position, right? You don't want it moving around, making having problematic situations. Did I make that table myself? Yes, I did. This was one of the first things that I made. It's not great. You can kind of see, give you a little bit of a view back here. So I've got it as a my garbage receptacle here. Just a couple shelves that I just, throw scrap onto because apparently my scrap boxes over there aren't enough. Then I just have the surface here, that guy there. So it's not great, but it works well enough for me right now that I haven't worried about doing something better for a while. So I've been meaning to make something better. I just haven't gotten around to it. But thanks for the question. Pretty cool. Thanks. Let's see. All right. So now that we've kind of understand the components of the saw, we want to look at what are we actually cutting, right? So before we make any cuts, we want to consider what we'd be cutting. And so for this guy, he's got a knot right there. So you want to do this not only for the miter saw safety, but also just considering your project, right? What do you want your end work product to look like? So do you want a knot? Is that going to be a problem to have a knot in whatever your finished product is? The first thing that I got a miter saw for was building shelves in the garage at our last house. And I wasn't really worried about knots and wasn't that worried about bowing and warping and whatever else, because it was going to be fine, right? It wasn't like a fine woodworking project or anything. But if your project can't have knots in it, you want to make sure you're cutting around the knot and not including that in your finished product. Another thing you want to be looking for is, especially if you're using reclaimed wood like this, are there any nails in it, right? So you might be able to see that right here, it looks like there is a nail still, right? So if you can see it shining there, shines off of the light. So it looks like that might be a nail right there. So I don't want to be cutting a nail with my miter saw because that'll damage my blade, okay? If I'm cutting wood or I'm cutting aluminum, miter saw should be just fine. But if you're trying to cut through steel or harder materials, miter saw is not the tool for that. Okay. I also want to look for staples, any imperfections in the wood, any aftermarket additives to the wood. Okay, let's see. All right, we already talked about if it's too small, and if you want to do a rip cut, it's not for the miter saw. Should be doing the rip cut on the table saw. Also, if it's too small, what should you use, right? So let's say, well, that's not even, let's come back to this example, right? Like I could safely cut that on the miter saw, right? But I'd need to use something to protect my fingers, right? Something to hold it down so that my fingers aren't at risk. So I'd rather not cut something like this on the miter saw. I would actually rather use the table saw for that. Now, I just told you earlier that the table saw is for ripping, right? But if you have a cross-cut sled like this, then it can also be for cross-cutting, okay? So without the sled, right? Whoa! Without the sled, my camera falls down. Without the sled, you would use the table saw. Let me find somewhere to like this without it falling around. Without the table saw, or without the crosscut sled, you would use this guy for ripping, right? So I'd bring my fence over, raise up the blade, right? And then I'd run the workpiece along the fence to rip the cut. Okay, again, that's ripping is with the grain. if I want to cross cut, I definitely don't do that on the table saw without any other jigs, right? Very dangerous. If I want to cross cut on the table saw, then I bring my crosscut sled back over. And now I can safely use this for cross cutting, right? So if I want to cross cut that, I can use my stop block, right? Lock that in, and then I can make my cut. You know, obviously I need to raise the blade. And so I can get much smaller pieces safely cut with a crosscut sled, where the sled is what's moving. You know, the blade stays stationary. I mean, it's spinning, but it otherwise stays stationary. So the crosscut sled is generally a lot safer for small stock. And because I can put a stop on here, if I need to make repeated cuts, right? So let's say I need, you know, actually, let me bring it over to the other side. Let's say I need a bunch of pieces cut at 1 inch. Okay, I've got my tape right here. So I can see that I'm cutting 1 inch. Bring that in, cut it, remove it, and then I can just go for the next one, cut it, and so I can get repeated cuts that are exactly the same size using the stop block. Hard to do that on the miter saw when you're looking to cut something so small, and that's pretty dangerous, right? So I can do stop blocks on the miter saw. So the easiest way to do it is something like this, right? So I could just take this block and clamp it to the fence. And then if I want to cut something, I just bring it to that point, make my cut, and then I can advance it and, you know, cut it again. And again, I've got, you know, exact same size of material using the stop block. But you'll notice this is a lot longer piece than what I was talking about before. So you don't really want to be using this for really small pieces. Just a little too dangerous. Let's see. Cool shop setup. Oh, thanks. Thanks for being here, everybody. Appreciate it. Okay. All right. So keep hands away from our no cut zone or no go zone. No arm crossing. Yeah. So I'm right-handed. Okay. So let me back you up a little bit here and straighten that out a little. All right. So when I'm making cuts, I'm holding the piece with my left, and then I hit the safety with my right hand, and, you know, hit the trigger with my right hand, and then come down and cut. Okay. Let's say that my workpiece was on the left side for whatever reason, right? Well, I'm still right-handed, right? So I still want to be right here, right? Not a good idea to twist like that and hold with your left and bring the blade down with your right. Okay, that would be you know, if you're left-handed, much better idea. Hold with your right and do it with your left. Okay, whenever possible, I'm over here, right? Sometimes I do end up using my left with the blade, you know, with the trigger, and have it hold the material with my right. And I'm not going to say that I've never crossed the streams, but, you know, like with Ghostbusters, don't cross the streams. Don't cross your arms as you're trying to cut with the miter saw. Okay. All right, so we talked about securing the material, right? So it's firm against the table, firm against the fence, okay? I'm clamping it down, right? So you don't necessarily have to use the hold down clamp, depending on what type of material, what the material is that you're using, but it's not a bad idea to use it. And then when you go to cut, you will, depress the safety, hit the trigger, let the blade come up to full speed, okay, before you start bringing it down, and then slowly and smoothly bring it down through the cut, go all the way through, and then when you're done, getting all the way to the bottom, let go of your trigger and safety, let the blade stop, and then come back up, okay? That's especially important if you're using a stop block, because what'll happen, especially with the stop block, if you bring the blade up before it's stopped spinning, it's going to shoot that piece somewhere, that piece that's lodged between the blade and the stop block. If you're not using a stop block, it's less likely to happen, but it still can take that offcut and throw it somewhere. The piece over here, it's secured, right? It shouldn't go anywhere. But the offcut, the blade can throw it somewhere if you start moving the blade up before it stopped spinning. Okay. And hey, if you guys have any questions, let me know. Yeah, using the factory clamp is a better option for beginners. Yep, absolutely. Definitely. All right, and so right now I've got the miter saw so that it doesn't slide, right? So it's only going straight down. And if you don't need to slide in order to make the cut, so if you're cutting something that's this wide, and you don't need to be cutting out here, then it's fine to just keep that engaged, right? Keep that lock engaged. So on mine, the lock is right here. So I can lift that up, and that allows me to slide out far enough to where I could cut out here, okay? But if I don't need to be cutting out here, generally better keep that lock engaged, okay? Now, if I do need to cut further out, I'll disengage the lock and come out as far as I need to make the cut. Again, depress the safety and the trigger, get my blade up to speed, and then start out here, go through smoothly, and then push in, until I get all the way back, and then trap my cord in again. Sometimes, though, if you've got a piece of wood that's especially thicker or warped or whatever, there can be a lot of tension in the wood. And so sometimes it can make sense to go partway through, so maybe halfway, and cut all the way through halfway, and then come back out to finish the cut. So that way you're releasing some of the tension in the wood so that it doesn't do crazy things. Most of the time, though, it's fine to just go straight through, slowly, smoothly, and you're fine. Okay. Let's see. Kickback is dangerous. Absolutely. Absolutely. Just taught Miss Francis all this. Yeah, sweet. We should have you be doing this this video, Bill. It's Bill Schaup, everybody. He has a great channel. All right, so let's demonstrate with the miter saw actually plugged in. Okay. So plug that in, and I'll connect my dust collection. Oh, I'm going to lock this back in so it doesn't move around on me. Now, one of the things about this cart that I kind of regret that when I finally do rebuild, I'm going to do differently. My caster wheels don't have any brakes on them, so there's no way for me to really secure this, and so that's not the best for a miter saw stand. So it's better to have something that, if you're going to have it on wheels, then make it so that your wheels can either break, or even better, that your wheels can come up, and so then it's standing on the legs instead of on the wheels. That's just a safer situation. So one thing I would do differently, one thing I will do differently when I build next time. Okay, so eye protection, ear protection. And then I'm going to turn on the shop vac, and I'll depress the safety, push the trigger, and come all the way through, release the trigger, let the blade come to a stop, and then come back up, and then we can inspect how we did. Everybody ready? All right, here we go. All right, you guys saw, hit the button, let it come up to speed, smoothly went through. Maybe some would argue that I wasn't smooth enough. Let go of the trigger, let it come to a stop, and then come back up. Okay, and there's what our cut piece looks like. So you see there's just a tiny bit of tear out right there. Not really too much there or there. So pretty smooth, nice cut. So I'm pleased with that. All right. And Bill had a nice comment here about always keep it down when not in use. That is probably a good idea. So I'm going to unplug it because I don't need to be using it at the moment. Put it up here. So there is a way to lock it down so that it's not going to be hurting anybody, right? So on mine, that feature is just right here. But yours could be different. We're in a different location. All right. So that's how it works. Let me know if you have any questions, concerns, jokes, and good way to store it. I don't usually do that, but Bill's right. That's probably better to do it like that. And yeah, hit the like button, subscribe. Oh, and I just remembered that there is a feature on these live streams that I always forget about. That I want to use right now. So all of you can become members, and I'm going to gift some memberships right now. So let's see who got those memberships. Carrie, and let's see, Base, Rhinestone Suzanne got a membership. Rooted Dwellings, Matt Lee, sweet. So welcome to membership in the channel, and you get all sorts of fun benefits. So if you didn't get a membership gift, feel free to hit membership anyway. And you know what? I am going to dig in here and send 5 more. That's my maximum for the month. But we're nearing the end of the month, so I figure why not? Why not hand them out now? So we've got memberships for Mike at Taz River Artisans and Mead Mood Poisoning. I need to clean off my screen, it looks like. Soldier Farms, Dale Nottingham, TE Painting. And yeah, welcome to membership, everybody. Appreciate everyone who participates and everyone who's a member, like Bill and many others. So, all right, Lawrence, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. And to those of you who got memberships, welcome. To those of you who didn't, you can still join. Feel free. And Thunder Gouge, thanks for being here. And Rick James, hello. And let's see, any questions on miter saw use or safety? If so, throw them in the chat. If not, I'm getting ready to pretty much shut down. So if you got a question, you better be quick about it. And how small is my blade? That's an interesting way to phrase that question. How small is my blade? Why would you ask how small it is? Why are you trying to put that energy on me, Bill? Like, how big is your blade? How big is your equipment? That's a better way to phrase it in my mind. But my miter saw has a 10-inch blade. I used to have a miter saw with a 7.5 or 7.25 inch blade. I never remember which it was. I think it's 7.25 inch is the size. And of course, you've got 2 more inches than I do. Braggart. You should show me how to use. Hey, no problem. No problem. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Any other questions, concerns, jokes? And that's what she said. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right. Hey, thanks everyone for being here. I will call it good, and we'll catch you all next time.